Okay, that's perfect. So, hello everyone. My name is Valentina, and I'm one of the mentors here at UX3, but also a founder of UX3. UX3, for all of you who don't know, who will be watching this recording, is a mentorship program based in Ireland, and we're basically helping junior UX designers with networking, with meeting people, and also with kind of giving them the access to real life case studies and everything. So yeah, you can read more on our website. So thank you so much for joining us today for Getting Started with UX, a guide for junior designers webinar with Myles. We're super excited to have you all here. So let me just quickly introduce Myles Carey. Myles is a senior UX designer at Backbase. Myles will probably speak about his experience tonight because he's been here, there, where you are now, and we've all been, in the same shoes at some point in the start of our career. So my guess is Myles has figured out some things, and he will tell us a secret. So yeah, I'm handed over to you, Myles. So I'll just stop blabbling now.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm still learning, if that helps, but perfect. Okay, let's get started. First, I'll make an apology in case my dog, who is sleeping next to me on this seat, barks at any point. Just ignore her if she jumps up. But hey, yeah, thanks for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that time's precious, right, for everyone. So yeah, thank you for joining and for listening to the talk. I will cover these things today. So personal intro to start. I'll talk more about my experience. I'll also talk a bit about my company Backbase. Then we'll talk about, okay, what are you going to look for in your first role? What's my advice on what to look for? Then we'll talk briefly about your role as a junior UX designer. So in a company, what does that then mean? What should you look for? Some tips and tricks to learn quickly. And then at the end, to be honest, I'm leaving most of the time for a Q&A because obviously I can't cover all of your personal questions, right? But at least I can dedicate a large portion of that to helping you. So that's what we'll cover, but you can also just stop me at any point, right? So if you see something in the slide that you're like, hey, yeah, I want to know more about that, then just stop me, ask your question, maybe put your hand up, and then we'll get to that. Cool. So personal intro. I'm Myles, as I said. I'm a senior UX designer working at Backbase. I've been in the industry for 5.5 years, so quite a while now. Before that, I was in digital marketing and briefly in web development. And primarily, I've worked full-time in my UX career at fintechs. So Backbase is a fintech, which I'll talk about more about in a sec. But I've also worked at a UK-based lender. I've also contracted, though, for foundations that have supported startups, so taking them through design thinking, teaching them about UX, all of that stuff. I've also worked with a founder on a skincare startup, so that one was quite cool. And yeah, I've also done some other bits and pieces here and there. I'm currently living in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I moved from the UK about 2.5 years ago. Through Backbase, so that was super cool. And I don't have a slide on Backbase, but I will talk to you about them. So Backbase is essentially a white label product for banks. So they produce a engagement banking platform, and essentially what that means is that they take their R&D apps. So I'm in the R&D department. They take their R&D apps, and then banks across the world apply their theme to it, and then essentially it runs software for millions of people. At the moment, we have about 100, 200 banks worldwide that use Backbase. So you've probably at least seen a Backbase powered app at some point, if not interacted and used one. I work on the employee side of banking though. So I work for a marketing tool, which is ironic given my background. And I've also, helped a little bit on the customer support application, but not much on there. And before that, I was in identity, so covering user profile stuff. So yeah, that's Backbase in a nutshell, essentially. So let's jump into the presentation, right? I'm not going to spend too long babbling on. So ultimately, your first role in UX will set the foundation for your career. Everything I learned in my first role, I still apply to some extent today. It also guides how you learn things as you grow, right? The way you learn stuff when you're in your first company, in your first role, you will also take with you through your entire career. So it really sets the foundation for perhaps when you become a senior designer, or when you become a lead designer, or even when you get up to the point of like a design director or a chief experience officer, right? Which is a long way away, I grant you, but you know, it really does help to think in that way, right? That everything you do now will then be important later. That kind of means that it's really important that you get the right environment for you as a junior. You can't always be picky as a junior, right? So the market's not the easiest thing to break into, but it is important that there are foundations in place for you, because the last thing that I would want you to do is go into a role where you're not supported, you're not helped, and then you're scrambling around struggling. So even if in your company there's not that foundation, you can find it elsewhere, which we'll talk about, and which UX3 can also help with. But ultimately, what I want you to take away from this is going to set the foundation for your entire career. So when you're looking for a role, these are going to seem really obvious, but I'll tell you how you can actually find out in a minute about this. You're looking for support, right? You're looking for a guiding, supportive environment. You're looking for learning opportunities, which granted will happen anyway if you're in your first UX role, but really a company that helps you to see those learning opportunities, grasp them, and teach you how to deal with certain situations is important. But by far the most important one is an environment to make mistakes. Even at my job level as a senior now, I'm still making mistakes. And it's okay, because I have a supportive environment that helps me. But as a junior, that's even more important, right? Because ultimately, you're getting used to the industry. You're going in there for the first time. Making mistakes is how you learn. And so that's fine. A company should accept that that is what a junior will do, and they'll guide and support you through that and help you learn. And making mistakes is nothing to fear, right? You'll probably do that for the rest of your career as well, because I do. So there are questions you can ask when you get to interviews that will help you to determine whether this is the right environment for you. For example, there are a few on screen. I'll talk through a few of them. So asking what will my first 60 days look like is a really important question, right? Because if someone answers that hey, we really need someone to come in right away and do all the design work within the first 60 days, and we need you to have built an entire platform, that's not really a fair thing to put on a junior as their first job, right? But if they say, actually, I'm expecting this role to get up to speed with the product, so using the product, understanding a bit about the product, I'm looking for that person to pair with a senior, for example, or even above that, sometimes a mid, then that's the type of things you're looking for, ultimately. If they don't tell you, hey, look, you're going to be working with XYZ role in the previous one, you can ask that again, right? You can be like, okay, and what are the types of people I'll be working on with projects? Who am I going to be working alongside? Usually you'll get answers of if you're in squads traditionally anyway, so multifunctional teams like app, iOS, Android developers and web developers, there'll be a product manager, usually maybe a project manager. But also, yeah, you're looking for, hey, there's another senior designer on the team that can help you make your first steps and that you can shadow. The kind of rituals you can also ask about for design feedback, because even at my stage, right, I'm still learning things from design rituals now from stuff I present. Sometimes I present really stupid stuff, but ultimately that's how I learn, right? So it's important for you as a junior to do the same thing. So you can ask, what kind of rituals do you have? And when I say rituals, I mean meetings, but it's a very tech term to call them rituals. In there, you're looking for, there's a weekly critique, right, of design. You can bring any design you want to the table, and we'll get together as a team and we'll talk through it, and we'll ask questions, and then we'll point you in the right direction. Also, prioritization meetings. Those are kind of things that are good for a junior, because you can then talk through what you've got to do. And also one-to-ones are very important. We're usually at this stage with a UX design manager, right? Because you're going to face a lot of things. So it's helpful to have a manager that's able to guide you. But you can also have mentoring sessions with a senior or anything else to cover that. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I think also a good one is like what support is in place, because if they don't tell you, hey, we're going to pair you with a senior, right, you can kind of tease out through this question, is there anyone there? Because how else will you know, basically? So I'm going to pause quickly. Any questions on this slide before I move on? No? Perfect. Okay, let's get into your role as a junior UX designer in a company. First off, when you get your first role, the first thing you should do is take a moment to just step back and like pat yourself on the back, congratulate yourself, right? It's a big deal getting your first UX role. It's a big deal getting your first role in anything. But for UX, the market isn't, the market is tough sometimes. It leads you through quite a few missed opportunities. So it's a really important moment to actually step back and say, hey, like, this is a good thing. I've got this role. Great. What next? After this, and I talked about it beforehand, I think it's really important as a junior in your first role, if you can learn from a senior, preferably a senior, could be a mid, a very strong mid, or it could be even higher than that, right? A design manager. But the first thing I would say to you to do, in my opinion, is to ask to shadow a senior on a project. And I know that that's like, hey, I'm a designer, I'm in my first role, like I just want to do the work, right? Like I've trained for this, I'm ready. And that's okay. But actually there's nuance in how a senior will go about their job that you can really learn from, and the way that they collaborate with stakeholders, because stakeholders aren't always the easiest, or that senior has already found ways of storytelling or ways to convince someone to like take your view or to help you. So ultimately, if you can do that, then you're going to be way better off in the future. I would do that very soon in your career, right? And if you can't do it here, then maybe there's other ways you can do that, which I'll talk about in a minute. Once you've shadowed someone, a good environment will then say, hey, now you've shadowed someone, here's like an initial brief, right? See what you can do. I'll be here to support you. So I'll talk you through the different stages of what we do. But then within that, I'm going to give you the opportunity to do what you need to do in that. And then ask for feedback. Sorry, that's my dog. Yeah. A company, as I said, a company that has a plan for juniors, they should have already set that up. What you'll see on the right is what we actually consider the double diamond approach in UX, right? It's a very famous define, deliver, etc. I've turned it into one that you can use as a junior. So when you shadow, you listen. Then when you get your own product, you test the same things that senior might have done, and plus your own techniques, right? Then you get feedback. You ask for feedback very often, and that's going to put you in quite a Like, not everyone loves feedback, right? But getting used to it now will help you when you're up the food chain. So get comfortable with feedback as soon as you can, and then iterate on your own approach and start again, right? Because then ultimately you're constantly learning and it goes in a cycle. If you're not in a position where your company can do this, which not everyone is, and that's okay, it doesn't mean that you're going to automatically struggle, right? You don't have to struggle. But what you do then have to do is find a different way to get the same kind of experience. So that's where UX Tree can be really great for that. But also ADP list, some things like that. Go in there, find a senior mentor, and go and talk to them about what you're facing, right? That's why I added on this thing. You'll see on the outside of this that there's an ask section, then a listen, then a test, then a feedback, then an iterate, because you can keep going through that. It will require you to be upfront with your issues and take things as a mentor. When I mentor juniors, I expect them to come to me with like, hey, I'm struggling with this. So be really forward in what you want from that mentor. And they should be able to help you. They won't get all of your context naturally, but they should be able to talk you through the generic ways and be really open to what they're saying, right? Even if that's uncomfortable, because otherwise, like, you have to think, what's the best way to mentor someone? If that relationship isn't working for you, then my best advice, as my dog is hungry, sorry, my best advice is to find another mentor, right? Say, hey, listen, this kind of isn't working for me right now, but like, go and find someone else and keep doing that until you find a mentor that you actually want to learn from. And it's okay to not like get on. You're not going to get on with everyone, right? And it's the same with mentors. Not everyone has the right approach for you, the right learning style, the right teaching style, and that's perfectly okay. You shouldn't be too, proud about that. In your first 60 days at a company, I cannot stress this enough, that on day 1, 2, and 3, you should already be asking your developers for the link to your demo product and the logins. And you're going to want to click around, find every hole you can. You're going to want to understand what the flow is for someone to go through, because using your product is the only way you're going to be able to, empathize, as the industry term is, right? You can do all the stuff in the background with personas and all of that stuff. But if you're not in your product day in, day out, you're not going to know what's right and what's wrong. You're also going to, if you log into your product, you're also going to be able to find UX holes, right? Which other people have done. And we all leave them. Like, I still leave UX holes in my designs. And you'll be able to learn that way as well. So it's so important that you log into your product and you click around and you mess around with it. Do whatever you can to get into that in day 1, 2, or 3. You learn a lot about personas, right, in courses, and personas are great. Sometimes they're a little overrated, I believe, but you can also use them to your advantage. If you have them, go find them, go read them. Just because I say they're overrated, it doesn't mean that they actually are, right? They're a good guide for you. But sometimes you need testing. You can't just rely on that, right? You need to understand the feedback. But it is important that you understand who you are designing for. Also, research doesn't just come in the form of like doing like one-to-one research, right? It's not like I have to talk to you to know, hey, you're a banking user. I can also listen to podcasts about my product and the space that I'm in. I can find UX videos from people similar in the industry. I could reach out to them even. I could discuss it with them. All of those things is still research and helps you to gain a product understanding, which will be crucial, not only for now, but also in 6 to 12 months time, when maybe you're designing things alone, right? You're in the process and you're maybe getting feedback through that process, but you're responsible for that end-to-end process. Everything you learn in your first 60 to 90 days will be crucial for them. And you're going to want to understand your environment. So who are your main stakeholders? What are the dynamics? You want to spend some time mapping that out. And to be honest, this is not just a junior thing, right? I also still do this now when I join a new company, whenever I haven't joined a company in like 3 years, but back then I did this. I was mapping out, okay, like who's responsible for what? Who do I need to build a good relationship with? Developers, a good case in point, right? Front end developers are crucially important. They're going to basically determine whether, your product that you design gets implemented properly. Product managers, you'll be working with them so often. So you kind of have to get used to that dynamic. So just spend some time understanding the different job roles, understanding their motivations, how to talk to them, how to convince them, how to story tell. And this will also be an ever evolving thing, right? Because no two people are the same. So you'll get one product manager who you talk to in one way and another product manager who you talk to in a different way. Some developers will need you to be there guiding them through hey, this color should be this and this spacing should be this. And sometimes developers just get it, right? And they just do it exactly how you've designed it. So there's always differences. To learn on the job, there's also questions you can ask, right? It's no different to an interview, really. You're just there longer term and you're consistently working for them. So when people bring things to crits, for example, that you're learning from, maybe they're a mid designer, maybe they're a senior, the questions that you ask can be key because they can tell you why someone's doing something and what context and constraint they're in that you can then apply to your work as well, right? So what factors did you consider when you designed this? What were you thinking about when you used this design system component in this way, right? Be really open and curious about that. And also this will be great for your later career because oftentimes you don't want to just jump in and say, oh, no, that's the wrong approach to a different designer, right? You want to understand why they're doing something before you do that. So as I say, the thing you're learning here, the way you question things here will set you up for the rest of your career. What jobs are my users trying to accomplish is so important because, again, we can read all the personas we like, all the demographic data that we like, but ultimately it all boils down to what job is my user trying to do in this moment, right? So I'll give you an example. We call it the jobs to be done framework. One example of that is, hey, as a banking user, I'm trying to send a payment, right? So what that tells me is I shouldn't be distracting their focus everywhere else when they're trying to make a simple payment. That's not the right thing to do, right? So always asking, hey, but what's the user trying to do in this moment can help. Also, there's a large focus on this at the moment, I'd say, in the industry about marrying UX with business goals. You'll hear about this a lot. It's not something that I'd expect a junior to just do right out the box. It's a skill that even seniors are learning now, and above that, even leads are still learning this. But if you can do it now, then you'll take it through your career. What's the business trying to achieve? What's the vision? How can what I produce solve the business's goals, right? And if you can do that at really early stage in your career, you're going to be very valuable for a company. If you can find a way to story tell with UX, things that you want to achieve UX wise into a business context, you'll get so much more done in a business. You can also say, hey, this was a nice approach, but could we try this approach, or could we try this this method? And usually in a supportive environment, the answer will be yes. Maybe you're under time constraints, so you can, but hopefully you'll get the opportunity to carry out some of these things. So then that leads us to my big point, right? Ultimately, your role as a junior is to experiment, is to make mistakes, is to ask questions. I'm expecting juniors to fail, and that's okay because we all fail. I still fail now. But also, if you can learn quickly from that and you can take the context and you can apply it elsewhere, you're invaluable to a company. You will grow with that company. Questions is the most important thing you can do. I'll talk in a minute about how like that can sometimes feel a lot. But if you ask lots of questions, you will succeed. You will gain information from everyone. Doesn't even have to be a UX job role. Why does a product manager do things this way? What are you trying to achieve? What's a UX designer trying to achieve? What does that mean for me? Now, as I alluded to, right, like when I was younger in my career, I probably felt nervous, anxious, or sometimes I just struggled to ask these questions, right? As a junior, you're kind of in a situation where it's like, like I'm a junior. Are my questions like dumb? Is this a good question to ask in this moment? But we've all been there, right? Like I still ask questions now that sometimes I'm like, should I be asking this? Will my product director, for example, think that this is a good question to ask? But then I tell myself, at the end of the day, there are no stupid questions. It helps my understanding. Everyone started out at some point, and in a few years, you'll be in my position, right? You'll be 5.5 years in doing one of these talks, and you'll be saying, hey, don't worry about asking questions. It's fine. You just got to do it. Ultimately, asking questions early, in 6 months' time, you will still remember what you've asked and the thing that you've gathered from that, and you'll still apply it, right? So it's okay. Ask as many questions as you can to the point of being annoying. How you can apply this, so some of you are in the UX tree course, right? And I wanted to just quickly touch on like how you can get the most out of the talk that I'm giving you. And even if you're doing case studies and you've got a mentor outside of the UX tree course, but primarily in the UX tree course, right? At each stage, you can ask your mentor, if this were a real world project, like what other factors would I be considering? So what might go wrong in a process? Like what may constrain me in a process, right? That then will give you the opportunity to simulate those constraints in this environment so that when you go into a UX role, you're not surprised that there's constraints, right? Because there's always constraints in every business. So you can simulate them. And it's even more impressive if you then say, hey, and I'm presenting how I got around those constraints, how I would in a real company get around that, right? And then once you've simulated, you're now presenting it. You can talk about that at interviews. If I saw a junior come in and say, hey, but I was working with a mentor and I asked, what would the real world constraints be here? And they said to me, you know what, like in this context, maybe I wouldn't have enough budget, for example, to test. If you come to me and say, to get around that, I did X, Y, Z, I would find that so impressive as a junior. Like that would set you apart from everyone else in the industry because not everyone has that ability to do that, right? Raise the bar when you're talking about this in interviews and you will get opportunities. And finally, before we move on to the QA, at the end of the day, right, you want to join UX because it's a good industry. It's a nice role. You're helping people. It's great. You're designing things that will be used. Sorry about my dog. You'll be making things for people that will be used across the internet. You will probably get imposter syndrome. I still do today, right? It's fine. We all get it. You have to bring your confidence back in. Sometimes you'll feel out of your depth. Again, I still do today, right? But it's okay. It's an opportunity to learn. I know this sounds cliche, but bear with me. No question is a stupid question. To be honest, if you think it's a stupid question, it's probably not. And someone else in the room is probably thinking the same thing, but just won't say it, right? Because they're also thinking that. And you know what? People will be more impressed if you stand up and say, hey, like, I kind of not sure if I should ask this question, but, and then go ahead and answer it and ask it. And ultimately, you're entitled to support as a junior, right? You're never going to learn quickly and in the right way if you don't actually ask for what you're entitled to. So if you go into a business and this isn't in place, talk with your manager about what you could do. If it's not if it's not possible right now, what else could you do? Go and find a mentor, go and do something else, right? Ultimately, you should also be very forthcoming in that. And that is it for my presentation. I've spoke at you for long enough. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.